Hello, my name is Christopher Sands and I'm a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute with some prospective comments on the Guadalajara Summit of North American Leaders taking place August 9th and 10th. This summit is a particularly important summit, but perhaps the most important aspect of the summit is that it's taking place at all. The tradition of annual summits of North American leaders bringing together the President of Mexico, the President of the United States, and the Prime Minister of Canada began during the second term of the George W. Bush administration and is most noted for its supervision of a new intergovernmental process known as the Security and Prosperity Partnership for North America, or the SPP. The SPP involved 20 working groups, 10 dealing with economic issues, 10 dealing with security issues, each of which was trilateral, co-chaired by a Mexican, a Canadian, and an American senior official, and worked toward harmonization of regulatory and inspection standards and the working out of common positions where possible among the three governments. This initiative was highly touted, but immediately suspected by many in all three countries for two reasons. One, the operation of the working groups was non-transparent. It was difficult to tell what exactly was on the agenda at any given time. And two, the SPP working groups seemed to be about moving towards a single North American market, but perhaps also a single North American polity. Critics feared that sovereignty was on the table and that national sovereignty of each of the three countries would be surrendered in a new effort at supranationalism in the manner that Europe had taken decades before. In fact, the SPP working groups were something less than that, practical, sometimes technocratic, but accomplishing small, often very modest gains for the three governments, such as working out a procedure to deal with pandemic threats that was very useful in the last year in responding to the swine flu outbreak of H1N1, helping the governments to coordinate so that when the first evidence of the flu virus was available in Mexico, it was a Canadian lab that diagnosed the actual strain, and the CDC in Atlanta that was able to spread not only information about the strain but on how it should be treated quickly enough that many lives were saved. These sorts of technical outcomes make North American cooperation worth doing. On the other hand, the SPP and its institutional structure had become a barrier to continuing to move forward. The Obama administration has taken two important steps with this meeting in Guadalajara. The first is a commitment to future summits. By continuing the work of his predecessor without any negative comment, the President is reinforcing the importance of neighborhood. Perhaps as a former community activist, he understands the importance of working with the neighbors to make the neighborhood a better place. In any event, the other aspect of President Obama's strategy is to make this much more a results-oriented partnership, something that's focused on real needs. After Guadalajara, there will be no more working groups meeting in secret, but instead, the President, the Prime Minister, and the President of Mexico will set common goals. They'll ask cabinet secretaries to meet together to work out details, and those cabinet secretaries will assign officials to work on the technical issues, and everything will then be reported back through the chain so that when the next annual Summit of Leaders takes place, any new agreement can be observed, ratified by the constitutional authorities of the three countries. No supranational institutions, and no loss of sovereignty other than what is negotiated among the three countries for the best interests of their citizens. This is very promising and has already led to a couple of interesting new initiatives. For one, we've seen the governments of the United States and Canada working to help the government of Mexico to train 9,000 new counter-narcotics officers to assist in their fight against drug cartels and the violence in Mexico. It isn't easy to train 9,000 new police in a hurry, and so Canadian and American police trainers have joined police trainers from other countries in Europe and in Asia to help Mexico to reach its goal in a hurry. This cooperation and coordination also has helped to build trust among American and Canadian law enforcement with their Mexican counterparts. Also, we've seen the three countries develop clean energy dialogues. U.S. and Mexican researchers, U.S. and Canadian researchers looking at ways in which they can improve the carbon footprint of the economy that we now share. This is particularly important as we move forward towards the Copenhagen talks in Europe, the UN-sponsored environmental talks working on a global climate strategy. Whereas Europe, with a longer experience with cap-and-trade systems, has more common perspective among European countries than you see elsewhere. and Asia has more resistance to global disciplines on carbon that may retard their growth, the North American countries have been something of an anomaly, fighting more with each other and without a common position. But at Guadalajara, we may see the three countries working towards some baseline position going into Copenhagen that they can all share. It may be that crucial middle ground that makes progress at Copenhagen possible. Lastly, but perhaps most importantly, this will be a summit in Guadalajara about the economy. And the economy is number one on the agendas of all three countries. Each of the three North American countries has adopted a stimulus program, spending billions of dollars of public money to try to keep the economy going, to substitute for weakening consumer demand in the private sector. However, there have been concerns almost from the beginning that stimulus efforts in each of the three countries may be working at cross purposes. For Canada and Mexico, a major concern is that the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 contains funding, but with Buy American provisions that make it difficult to produce anything from a highway to a bridge or some other public bit of infrastructure while using a Canadian subcontractor or a Mexican subcontractor for cement, engineering, or other inputs. Because of the integrated economy that we have, the interconnections between our firms, in many cases this has meant that there's a fear of discrimination in the bidding process as states and communities, counties and cities give out contracts for new infrastructure using our money, that they may be avoiding working with Canadians and Mexicans and others who have a treaty right to be able to participate in those contracts, but are obviously not American. President Obama dealt with this very early on while the legislation was still pending in Congress, asking the Congress to adopt an amendment to the language that said that any spending of stimulus money must be consistent with U.S. international obligations to treaty partners. For example, the NAFTA countries, where we've all agreed that government procurement will be made without regard to national treatment. However, that technicality is not always clear at the city and county level or even at the state level where contracts are being let. So one of the priorities of the summit will be working to make sure that stimulus money is actually working together to build better infrastructure. Some have said this is a bad idea. Why shouldn't the United States reserve jobs for itself? The principle that we'll see coming out of Guadalajara is that contracts for stimulus spending must be issued on the basis of merit. The best contractor with the best technology and the best price. Otherwise, North America runs the risk of repeating the Japanese experience of spending too much on infrastructure. Lots of money is spent, but the infrastructure is no better than if less money had been spent, and now Japan carries more debt as a result. Certainly at a time when debt is already going to unprecedented levels in all three countries, we need to be very concerned that we not see debt increased unnecessarily through protectionist measures that are actually working at cross purposes to the goal, which is to get the economy back rolling again. The economy will be front and center, but at the same time, the process, the SPP, which was what these North American summits were originally intended for, will take a back seat. But more important than either of those things, the fact is that the Obama administration is making important recognition in Guadalajara that North America matters and is a natural community through which we can do a number of good things for our citizens transparently, openly, and hopefully with greater results than in the past. My name is Christopher Sands. Thank you for your attention.
The goal is to make